Welcome to the McFeely Mess podcast at InForum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
All right, welcome to the second reborn edition of the McFeely Mess podcast at InForum.com. Our guest last week, and thank you all for listening. We had some good download numbers on the podcast from a week ago. Joel Heitkamp, he was our guest. Good discussion about Doug Bergam's presidential campaign. I think honest. I think, obviously Joel and I are both coming from the left side of the aisle, and so we're not going to see Doug Bergam's campaign as necessarily anything special. I just think that we both saw it as maybe a missed opportunity and kind of just wondered what the heck he was doing. Our guest this week on the podcast is somebody who, if you have read the forum over the last, Jack, how long have you worked for the forum?
Well, officially 30 years and still working. And
you're still here. I'm still in this well-appointed office. Jack Zaleski, by the way, is our guest today, the former editorial page editor of the forum.
And here's this reborn podcast. I'm the second guest? Come on.
Yes, and you're lucky to be that high on the list. So I actually had a couple of people fall through, as a matter of fact. And so since you're in the same building as I am, I decided to call on you.
Well, I'm glad I got nothing to do.
You have a hell of a nice office here. They'll say that.
It is a nice office.
Your office is way nicer than my office, and I'm actually trying to crank stuff every day. You're like, and God bless you, you're still working. You're still doing your thing part-time, but goodness.
Not like you do. Not like you do 18 hours a day. I kind of pick and choose what I do, which is and it's a privilege to be able to have this space, do a little work, write a column once in a while, and do other things. And I'm loving it, considering that I'm retired officially. What's now? Oh, in 2017.
2017.
2017, officially. Yep.
What's the thing that you miss most? And this isn't about you. We're going to get into some political topics and discussion. I don't want to turn this into...
Wait a minute. Not about me? Come on.
Well, frankly, any discussion about you would be pretty short. There's just not a lot there. So
this is going to be tough.
So what do you miss most about the daily grind?
I miss the people in the newsroom, flat out. That's right on top of it. Of course, the newsroom has changed since I left because people are working from home. There's not a lot of people up there. But one of the real joys, and I guess that's the right word, privilege too, of coming to work here for all those years was the group of journalists and support people in that newsroom. As you know, Mike, journalists are a different breed.
Different breed of cat, yes we are.
They wouldn't want to do this kind of work if they were normal. But in all sincerity, I do miss the newsroom. In the 30 years I was in that newsroom, a lot of people went through it. A lot of people came in and settled in and are still there working, doing good journalism, doing what journalism is supposed to be, even if they're working from home now. But when it was a full house in there, when there were, 60 people in that newsroom, sports and features and the news reporters on their different beats, just going to the news huddles, talking with them, exchanging ideas. It was really a stimulating day. You look forward to coming in every day.
Yeah. And you joked earlier about me working 18 hours a day, and there are days when it's a really long day. Mm-hmm. Generally, I don't work 18 hours a day, but and I'm not saying this to pat my own back or anybody else's back. But when you do this job, when you're a journalist or a columnist or an editorial page editor, and you do it properly, in today's age, you really never turn it off, which is, you can debate the wisdom of that in terms of mental health and everything else. But with social media and with cell phones and with a 24-hour news cycle, I cannot tell you the number of times that my wife says, "Why are you on your phone?" And it's 9 o'clock at night. And it's, because this just happened in wherever, or we just had a story on this. And we just never turn it off.
It's the nature of even before social media, which has changed the way journalists do things, as you described. But even before that, because of the nature of the job, you really never were off. And there are consequences to that. Family, friends, because there's always something. You're always thinking about the next day's edition in the case of newspapers, or when you were doing the talk show, what you're going to do for the talk show. Oof. So on and on. And
the talk show was the newspaper thing is one thing.
Yeah.
Having hosted a daily 3-hour radio talk show for
that's a grind.
7 years or 10 years, actually, if I count my time at DAY and KFGO combined. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different animal.
Yes.
And guys, people in talk radio are there. That's a entirely different breed, both positively and negatively. I mean, every time I see Joel Heitkamp, a mutual friend of ours,
yes,
I mean that it's like, wow, man, that's
every once in a while I'll do Joel's show, or and through the years I've done some talk radio with the hosts of when DAY was a real radio station, which it is not, which it is not anymore. And I got the sense, again, comparing it to what we do in print, or did in print, and what you did in print, and both in sports and news, it seemed to me, and you would know this better because you did talk radio, it seemed to me to be easier. I don't think it is, but it just seemed that way.
Well, I'll say this, and we'll move on. Nobody cares about our lives. But
no, they don't.
But it is, if you do a 3-hour solo radio show, as I did,
it's a long time.
I was exhausted at the end of the 3 hours. Yeah. Exhausted, because you're putting every bit of your energy into being energetic. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't sit on the radio like this and talk like this for 3 hours. And
no, you got to be
Donald Trump is dangerous, and Tim Walz is great, and the phone lines are. You can't do that. It's got to all be.
You got to be up,
theatrical, and and yelling, and not necessarily real yelling, but sometimes for theatrical effect to get people riled up, and that it's all.
And then
I could go on for hours about talk
listening
radio.
to it now, and I listen to Joel once in a while, of course. Listening to it now, and I don't know if I would be able to be so polite and kind to some of the, not kind, but at least polite to some of the callers who are. Dumb as a door. Yeah,
dumb.
And they are, and they seem to revel in it. They seem to be proud of being stupid. And Joel has a knack of being
correct,
relatively polite to them.
Yes.
To sometimes he'll lose it, but what the hell?
And that's Joel is very good at what he does.
Yes.
And that's why I wasn't, was because because I just couldn't. I didn't have any patience for that. If somebody's going to call in and just say something so stupid and so inaccurate and just so dumb, shockingly, I don't know if you knew this or not, I don't have patience for that. And so
I've heard that.
And so it would just. And I've said this before. I said it recently to somebody, but it came down to I didn't respect. I respected the listeners, because you can't. The people who call in are a tiny fraction of the listenership.
Right.
I didn't respect the callers and those people who were interacting with me. And it came down to the idea. And my wife said this to me. She's like, "Would you talk with these people in real life? Like if they walked up to you in a bar or a restaurant and had a conversation with you, the way they're having a conversation with you on the radio, what would you do?" And I said, I would tell them to go F themselves and get away from me. And she said, exactly.
Take a hike, jerk.
So but in your professional life, you're forced to interact. She goes, if you don't, get out of there. If you don't like it, get out.
Wise lady.
Yep, absolutely. Way smarter than I am. Way smarter than I am. Although she married me, so maybe that wiseness. But anyway, okay. So anyway, let's talk for a few minutes, Jack.
Yes.
About what's going on in North Dakota. And I know that you've written about this in some of your columns, and I have too. But when you look at the Republican Party of North Dakota, and you've covered North Dakota politics for 40 years, 50 years?
50 years.
50 years.
Yeah,
so you've seen it all.
Way too long.
Yeah, so you've seen it all. You were in Bismarck in your previous incarnations at Devil's Lake as the editorial page editor. You know all the players. Maybe not so much now because you've been out of the game for a while, but you knew all the players for years and years and years. You had them come to your office. You went to their office. You were plugged in.
Oh, sure. Covered the legislature for all those times.
Yep.
And enjoyed it. Interesting people. Some good, some bad. Some Some really engaged, some serious about public service, others looking for a free lunch.
Free health insurance.
Yeah, free health insurance. Yeah, a lot of that.
When you look at the landscape now of North Dakota politics, on the Democrats are irrelevant in the state. When you look at the Republicans, what do you see?
Arrogance, entitlement, the corruption that comes with power, and that is showing up on in the news and on the front pages of newspapers. You're seeing these people self-destruct in a lot of ways, and you're seeing leadership in the Republican Party reluctant to clean up its own house unless they're really forced to because of exposure mostly. And as you dig a little deeper, as what's happening now, as good reporters are digging a little deeper, and they're finding out that this kind of conduct has been going on in the dark for a while, and now it's being exposed. So you're seeing, and I think a lot of it is a result of a deep fracture in the party of people who are traditional, the so-called traditional Republicans. We know them, lots of good people.
Absolutely, yep.
And those folks who are, who have, frankly, those folks who have, swilled the Trump Kool-Aid and are drunk on it, and that includes, the leadership of the party, Sandy Sanford and people like that, and those are the seeds of destruction. And we're beginning to see that kind of. The Republican Party in North Dakota is not going away because of the culture of the state, but people are beginning to see, who are not active in the party but are Republicans, are beginning to see a level of stench. That's beginning to that you can smell it across the whole state. So.
Have these people, and by these people I mean the far right, we call them Trumpers now, but they've always existed. There's always been, they were John Birchers at one point.
Sure.
They were, nativists at one point. They are white supremacists in some cases. They've always been there. They've always been, and not only in North Dakota. I don't want to throw that state, under the bus. They exist in Minnesota. They exist in South Dakota. They exist in New York. They exist in California. So it's not just a North Dakota thing. I want to make that clear. It's just that we're based here, and so we know more about it.
And the difference, Mike, is they've empowered themselves in North Dakota.
Yes, and so have they always been there, and they just weren't engaged, or they were in such a small minority that nobody paid attention to them, and that the quote unquote traditional Republicans, and we can get into that later because it just nothing pisses me off more than people saying, well, it's a real Republican is this. Well, we'll get into that later.
But I know where you're going.
Have they always been there?
Sure, but I think what you have now is a new generation of some of these people, and you see that a lot of them are young, that are kind of rising into that part of the party. The fellow from Williston who got himself in trouble because he said he was not nice to the police, and said some things that were obviously wrong and stupid. There's another one, a fellow named is Pritchard, I guess, who is they're young and mostly of a different generation than those Republicans that we've known through the years, who have, they're conservative, and you don't necessarily have to agree with everything they say, but they're generally good people. These people are not good people. They're looking to tear down, not build up, not serve the people, but serve their own interests, their own ideology, which they want to impose on people. And you get that from a number of them who have assumed or power has been ceded to them in a way that makes the entire legislature, for example, look bad.
So let's go down this road since I brought it up. It is one of the things that upsets me, and I agree with everything you just said. You and I think see this the same way, although we can parse some certain things. I would argue that Nico Rios's biggest
Williston, right?
The Williston guy.
Yep.
I would say that the most offensive things he did was not that he was mean to the cops. The most offensive things he did was that he used racist terminology and homophobic terminology and bigoted terminology. To me, that's the more offensive thing.
It is.
That he was mean to the cops. That's part of it, no doubt. But when the Republican Party and Doug Bergam sends out statements saying Nico Rio should resign because we can't treat law enforcement that way. And did not come out and say, oh, and by the way, he's a racist, homophobe, bigot, and there's no room in our party for that. They didn't say that.
No.
Which is, I think, a key omission.
No, and the head of the party backtracked on her first conclusion that he should be removed or he should resign, and then she backtracked a day or two later.
Yes.
And also fell into that weasel talk, that mealy mouth. It was because he wasn't nice to the law enforcement.
We back the blue, blah, blah, blah.
But the values he expressed, or the lack of values he expressed, apparently that's okay.
Right, and I wrote that in an online column. It should be soon enough in print.
Yeah.
But Howard Clug, the mayor of Williston, I don't know the man. Republican, from what I understand, very strong conservative Republican.
Good mayor,
which is just fine. That's not the point. But the point is that he came out and said the values that he expressed don't represent our area. We welcome immigrants to our community because they help build our community. We have.
He's one of the few.
We have people who he offended who live in our community, and he can't represent us if he's not representing those people. Right. So God bless Howard Clug.
Right. And he is a lone voice so far, I think, in the Republican Party who told it like it is. And it's disappointing that some of the leaders of the Republican Party, the office holders of the Republican Party who are prominent, can't seem to go there, where Clug did. And Clug was right. Clug was the voice of sanity, of reason, of decency. And the rest of them are just spinning around it. They're dancing around it like a bunch of cowards.
And so and this is again where I get miffed. And one of our coworkers at Forum Communications, Rob Port, who's done a great job of exposing some of this stuff. I mean, Rob was the one who exposed Nico Rios by writing about it and obtaining the body cam video and all that stuff. So I'm not knocking Rob's reporting of this situation.
Yeah.
I could call Rob and talk to him about it. Mm-hmm. But Rob comes at it from a point of, well, the Republican Party is really just fine. The Republicans are. This is not the Republican Party. Nico Rios doesn't represent the Republican Party. Kelly Armstrong represents the Republican Party. John Hoeven represents. Well, to me, Nico Rios is as much the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is the Republican Party, and so I'm not seeing where the line is, and I've written that multiple times. If somebody would tell me where that line exists to separate the Republican Party that Rob and many others see from the Republican Party I see, which is Trumpism. Well, then tell me where that is, and that's the part that ticks me off.
There is no line, and if there is, it's very fuzzy. And the reason is that the Republicans that we know and we have known for years, some of the ones you've mentioned and some of the ones I know in the legislature.
Yeah, there's locally, you and I know multiple
who
good,
admire
decent
those
people who are good human beings. They just think differently than I do, and that's fine.
But what they have done, and what you see this ascendancy in the North Dakota Republican Party as represented by, their new leader and people like Rios, who got elected, and others in the legislature, is that these so-called traditional Republicans have enabled that. They have allowed it to happen, and now that it has happened, and the party is, making the wrong kind of headlines, they're quiet. Too quiet, I think, or they'll say something. They'll say some sort of meaningless thing that, well, he shouldn't have said that sort of thing, rather than the strong condemnation that it deserves. Those kinds of things. So they're, by their weak responses or no responses to this kind of stuff, they're enabling the crazies to take over the party, which they're doing slowly, and they know it. And the others in the party know that. They're afraid in many cases because they don't think they know they'll get primaried, and it could be that in some of these cases they would get primaried out. They wouldn't survive, so they're afraid. But in the meantime, the party continues to drift in a direction that it seems to me is ultimately destructive for North Dakota.
So that's the next question. As somebody who has covered North Dakota politics for 50 years, you've been around a long time, far longer than I have in terms of just observing the political landscape and the state itself.
Longer than most legislators.
Yes, yes. What does this mean, not just politically, but for the state itself? If you're going to have what I would consider Looney Tunes running the show. Eventually, one of these people is going to get elected to a much higher office. I mean,
it's happened in other states.
Because if you are a Republican in North Dakota and you have the R behind your name on the ballot, people are going to vote for you. They might not know anything about you, but they are going to vote for you because you have the R. And by God, we're not going to elect any woke, Dem, lib, whatever's in North Dakota. So what does it mean for the state going forward when these guys and women gain more power, which they're doing, even at the district level, and eventually at positions of leadership and possibly the governorship and positions like that?
Well, it has to come from the so-called grassroots, the district level first, and then it percolates up. It percolates up to the higher offices, and we're seeing some of that already. You're right. The only thing would be that for those Republicans who see what we're describing here, is to get a little more aggressive about preserving the party of the party of law enforcement, the party of values, the party of decency, the part which is the way they've always described themselves.
Compassionate conservatism.
Right. Not always true, but nevertheless, that's the picture about what's happening to the party now, as represented by some of these people who get exposed and others who don't, but will. I think is of concern, I think, to, again, what we call the so-called traditional conservative Republicans. But they're letting it happen, and as long as they let it happen, they're responsible for it happening. Whether it makes a big difference in North Dakota, since the state is overwhelmingly Republican anyway, is another question. As long as the state is as flush with cash and as financially strong as it is, you could get 3 brass monkeys to govern the state, and you'd do just fine.
Life is good, right?
Yeah,
as long as life is good, people won't care.
Sure, you could get a baboon could govern the state because the state's in such good shape financially. You're just shuffling money around. You're not really, managing stuff because you don't have to make great cuts. You don't have to worry about those kinds of things. The money keeps pouring in. You look at what's happening in the oil industry. They're setting records every day for pumping. The revenue is coming in at levels far higher than was forecast. So governing the state, because the state's in such good shape, is not a problem, and most people, you'd say, around the state would agree with that, because they're seeing their local governments get money, they're seeing the roads get fixed, they're seeing the schools be funded at good levels, and so they really don't pay much attention to the kinds of values argument that's happening in the Republican Party, because everything looks good, the roads are fixed, so but in the long term, when the gravy train gets a little thin, and legislature has to start squeezing, which they haven't had to do now for 10, 12 years.
Maybe they'll never have to.
Well, maybe
with oil.
maybe they'll never have to. But there's a satisfaction level among the people of North Dakota that keeps things where they are politically. And doesn't pay attention to what's happening in the majority party, because it's not really affecting them directly. The crazies go to the meetings, they get there, they bring their people there, and they vote. And as long as the non-crazies, or the people who are really serious about public service, stay home, the crazies are going to win.
But here's the more difficult question is, but if the crazies are taking over the party. And you just mentioned how it happens, and you're right. It starts at the district level. They're the most engaged people politically. They go to the meetings. They're running for school boards. Yep. They're doing all the things they have to do to get power. But do the quote-unquote crazies, do they really represent the state of North Dakota then, if they end up taking over the vast majority of public offices in North Dakota? And the reason I ask that is because at some point you have to say, my God, this guy is nuts. But if you keep electing them and say, well, it's, I don't want, gay people in my town, so I'm voting for this guy. I don't want that book about, sex education in my library, so I'm going to vote for that guy. At some point, don't they represent the values of the people who vote for them? And to me, the overwhelming evidence of that is Donald Trump is going to get 70% of the vote in North Dakota next November. Well, I think, and Donald Trump, he is that. He's the guy. I mean, he's the one that brought all this stuff out into the open in many ways and let people say, "Oh my God, I can be an anti-homophobic or a homophobic bigot. I can and still get elected
and still claim I have family values."
Yes, and so that's where I go. Well, I scratch my head and go, well, so if Donald Trump gets 70% of the vote, then isn't that what the people want in North Dakota and many other states as well?
Well, I think there's something to it, and you do have to lay it on the people of North Dakota who vote, just as much as when Ross Barnett was governor of Mississippi, it was the people of Mississippi who voted him, or George Wallace was governor of Alabama, and the people of Alabama voted him in again, and so there's a argument to be made that the kind of values as represented by some of these candidates are merely a reflection of the values of the people who put them in office. Well, maybe, but then you have someone like Mayor Clug of Williston, who speaks out against the kind of rant that the representative Rios made, and so you still have that. And Williston, which is not an island of liberalism by a long shot.
About as conservative as you're going to get,
right? But you have a very popular mayor, a good mayor who's carried Williston through difficult times with the oil boom and all that stuff, speaking out and saying the right things. So maybe there are more people like him who have the courage and the political capital, I think, and he does up there,
that's important
to speak out. It's important, and I think there are people, including the members of our congressional delegations, Senate and Congress, who have that political capital, who are very popular, and will get reelected generally.
We're speaking of John Hoeven now, mostly.
I think of John Hoeven and who can speak out and don't.
And does not. Yep.
Right.
Kevin Kramer, I would say, is closer to the I don't want to call him crazy. He's not crazy, but he's closer to the.
Kevin seems to like to cozy up to the Trump folks.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. And I think he believes. I think Kramer. I don't think it's an act with him. With some of these Republicans, it's an act to cozy up to Trump. I think Kevin's a true believer in a lot of what Trump stands for, and
don't forget, you got to remember
evangelicalism and all that stuff.
And this comes with the history of covering politics. You got to remember, not that long ago, Kevin Kramer was cozying up to Rudy Giuliani.
Yes,
and I don't know. So you get that makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, so. and Doug Bergam, and that's again why Bergam is just. His statement to Port was just so weak and so mealy-mouthed about Rios. Bergam, I don't believe is one of these Looney Tunes. I think he's an incredibly smart guy. I think he's generally very moderate. I think a lot of the stuff that Doug puts out there is an act. I think he's trying to make sure he doesn't get outflanked to the right, and he knows that he has to have those people vote for him if he wants to be governor again, so he can make another terrible run at president in 2028. But I mean, just come out and at some point you have to look in the mirror, don't you? And you have to say, I don't believe that gay people are bad people. I have, most of us have them in our own families, and we love them, and our friends and coworkers. That we, I don't believe Doug Bergam's a racist. I don't believe that Doug Bergam is anti-immigrant. He's too smart for that. He knows the value of immigration. You can be anti-illegal immigration, but he knows the value of immigrants.
But if you have a position of power, And the governor of North Dakota is from a policy standpoint is a weak governor, but from a standpoint of the bully pulpit, the popularity, the ability of Bergam to have people listen to him, you do have a responsibility to, if you believe, as you said, you think he believes, he has a responsibility to say so, and to be out there and to counter the kinds of viciousness that we're hearing from other elements of his party. And so there's a responsibility, I think, on the part of any elected official, but in particular a very popular governor, an effective governor, a good governor, to represent, be the personification of the kind of values that the Republican Party used to be known for. And he's not doing that in a way that's effective. So,
is he running for governor again? Is he going to run for a third term?
Well, my first instinct would be yes, he is going to run for a third term. But I've been, chronically wrong about these things before.
We all have. In this business, you miss things.
But he's. I don't know if he's enjoying being governor, but he did try to make a splash on the national stage and made a ripple. Sort of a ripple, kind of a little bloop in the water.
I'm sure it was a ripple. Yeah.
A bloop in the water.
It was not much.
It was fun to watch him. I was happy he did it. I was, cheering for him to go further than he did. But he didn't change his message when he should have. He didn't distinguish himself when he should have. I imagine you and Joel talked about all this in the.
Yeah, we did. Yep.
Yeah, and so that story has been told, and I think he knows it. Wherever advice he was getting, or if he was getting good advice and not paying attention to it and then going with his own counsel, he made some mistakes, and it showed up pretty quickly when he didn't get on the latest debate. So all that stuff. But back home in North Dakota, where his real commitment is, and there's no question about it, he loves his state, he loves the service to his state, and he's been governor when the state's enjoying really good times, which is a nice time to be governor, and he doesn't seem to be as willing to speak out about what I think he really believes, because of the political blowback he would get from the people I describe as the crazies.
Yeah, no, I agree, which is too bad, because it, as you said, if you have a bully pulpit, part of your responsibility in having that bully pulpit is to speak up and speak truth to power, as the kids say, and be honest with people. And sometimes you have to say difficult things.
Right. And the thing about that truth to power thing is he is the power. He's the power, and he can burn some of that popularity, some of that position he has, and say the right things. But he seems to be reluctant to do so. And when he does say the right thing, sort of, about the situation with the representative from Williston, it's really kind of weasel words and mealy mouth and
which again leads to my belief that he's going to run for another term, because
I believe so.
If he was not going to run for another term, he would have come out and said what needed to be said.
I'll tell you, Mike, when the Republicans meet in Fargo in April, I believe, that is going to be a revelation about the condition of the party, because you're already hearing some people who are not going to seek the endorsement of the party going to run without him. And if you're going to have, and if the convention is stacked like it almost was last time, you're going to have people challenging some of the people who are in office now from the far right. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the convention represents the Republican Party of North Dakota, or is a bit of an outlier, and that's going to be, fascinating to watch.
Well, but I'll throw this at you though.
Yeah,
is Kevin Cramer did an end run on the actual North Dakota Republican Party?
He did,
right?
He did.
Doug Bergam did an end run on the North Dakota Republican Party.
He did.
And so I don't know that that's a new thing. I don't know. I have said for years that the North Dakota Republican Party, it's in power, but I don't know that it has power within its own family.
Yeah, I mean, the endorsement in those cases that you just mentioned obviously didn't mean a thing, because the people who were endorsed or came close to being endorsed didn't go anywhere. The people who are the traditional Republicans won re-election, or won election in the case of Kramer. So yeah, I mean, it may be that the party is, as dominant as the Republicans are in North Dakota, the party itself may not be representative of North Dakotans. But that's that argument we just talked about. That is it or isn't it? We'll see. So.
The corruption that's been reported by our company, our group of newspapers, and others is the list of scandals, and I wrote about them last week or the week before, that they're growing. The list continues to grow.
Yep.
And they're not small little, I miswrote a 0 on my expense report in the legislature. It is insider trading. It is blatant insider trading. It is the Nico Rio stuff, just the blatant racism, the blatant homophobia. It is emails being deleted at the direction of the Attorney General's executive assistant, and everybody kind of going, oh well, let's move on. And she gets a job at the the state's attorney's office in Burleigh County. It is this incestuous, just viper pit of, and this is just the ones we know about, by the way. I mean, this is just the ones that have been reported. Not surprising. Surprising? What's your?
Well, yeah. For me, having known some of these people who are getting sucked up in all this, former, the late Attorney General
Wayne
Stenjum, who I always admired. He's always a friend of newspapers in a way that protected the open meetings and open records law. I served on a couple of committees prior that he put together to when they needed revisions in the laws, and we'd meet and do that. And he was always a friend of the open meetings and open records laws, which is a big deal in our business. However, something else is going on, obviously, in the background that nobody knew about. The reason those emails, hundreds, thousands of them, were deleted at his death they were deleted by Liz Brocker, his lieutenant, his gatekeeper, his sergeant.
Fixer, some would say.
His fixer, the one you couldn't get to the Attorney General unless you went through her. But make no mistake about it, that was done because it was probably set up by the Attorney General. And whatever was in those emails was embarrassing enough so that Wayne Stenjum wanted them destroyed. And so you had two people who did a marvelous job of making them go away, because you've had some very high-powered tech people try to find them, can't get them. And so something was in those emails that had much more, that could have been, that I believe was much more damaging than anything about policy in the Attorney General's office. We'll probably never know. So you have that. And that really stinks. Then you have this thing with Representative Doctor and the sneaky, smelly real estate deals. Doctor and Stenjum, good buddies for years. Then you have the situation with
Ray Holberg up in Grand Forks, which is the mother of all the scandals. Right. I mean, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have
awful.
What appears to be misappropriation of public funds for nefarious purposes. You also have a relationship that goes way back, a professional and friendly relationship that goes way back between Holberg from Grand Forks and Wayne Stenjum, who represented Grand Forks in the legislature before he became Attorney General. All this tends to suggest, there's no proof here yet, no hard and fast proof, tends to suggest a kind of a secret sort of cabal of corruption that was going on behind the scenes, and no one was paying attention till now. And the Holberg thing started to break it open. But and of course, Wayne's Attorney General's unexpected death broke it open also. So, it doesn't take, you don't have to have all the details or a pile of proof to suspect that something is wrong here. What is it? Where there's smoke, there's fire. we don't know how deep these investigations will go. The Holberg thing is going to go to the end, that's for sure. But
yes.
The email situation, because they don't exist anymore, that looks to be a dead end.
Is this because of the individuals involved in it? It is, because it always comes back to that. You make decisions in life. But is it, I use the term incestuous because there's just simply no real opposition. And I'm not putting this on the Democrats. I'm not doing the Kelly Armstrong thing where you're blaming Democrats for Republicans' problems.
Yeah.
But the Democratic Party is just not relevant in the state, and so there's no competition, and there's just really no checks and balances.
That's
and
right.
is that who's policing the police, to use every cliche in the book?
The arrogance of power is, it's the arrogance of power, and we have an ethics commission, and some of these things have been referred to the ethics commission. It's kind of funny now that a lot of these people who are embroiled in clearly ethical violations opposed.
We're against the ethics commission.
Ethics, and a lot of people still do. A lot of Republicans still do oppose it, but it's. And the tragedy of it, and this is the thing that really bothers me, is that I think Wayne Stengham was a good attorney general, and when he was in the legislature, was a good legislator, kind of a middle of the road, moderate guy who did good work for his state as attorney general. I disagreed with him signing on to some of these crazy lawsuits that other states were bringing, but that's neither here nor there. The same is true with Ray Holberg. Ray Holberg's tenure as a legislator out of Grand Forks, doing the state's budget for years, knowing the numbers, helping the state get through bad times and good times. He was by any measure one of the best people dealing with the state's money, and so it's a tragedy that his career ends in the way it did. And it's going to. So that's the tragic part of all this. But the idea that they should be off the hook simply because they were good public servants when they were active, that's a mistake. They've got to be. These things have to be looked at. They have to be exposed, and they have to send a lesson to people who are involved in what might be called shady deals or abusing the public trust. Know that you can't do that. So
the Holberg stuff is a whole different level of. That's the doctor Stengham, Jason Doctor. I'm talking about the legislator,
the building stuff.
The building. That's corruption. That's run of the mill insider trading corruption.
Right.
The Ray Holberg stuff,
that's federal.
That's federal beyond
charges.
Anything.
Right.
The accusations are beyond anything that anybody should excuse and say, well, he did a good job for Grand Forks. You know what?
No
You didn't say that.
Just recognition that he did a good job. Yeah.
But the part about the Holberg thing that is amazing to me is you're telling me that nobody else knew. What he was doing.
I am not telling you that.
I'm saying that in a general rhetorical sense. Nobody else knew what he was doing. He was in the legislature for 45 years. He obviously had friends. He obviously had others who were participating in whatever he was alleged to have participated in. Nobody else knew it, rhetorically. Nobody else knew. Nobody else had an inkling. Nobody else saw fit to go, and speak up about this. Nobody, and I'm not talking about that he's using dollars from this pile over here to go allegedly do his alleged proclivities in Czechoslovakia. I'm talking nobody went, wow, the party I was just at, that was kind of strange. That was a little, some weird stuff going on there. Nobody else knew.
Well, whether they knew it or not, what makes this something that needs to be investigated to the fullest, as it's going to be, is the misuse of public money. That's the door. That's the door.
That's the hook to
that's the door into
yes.
it, because there are apparently no checks and balances on how this public money was distributed, who it was going to, or were there any kind of reporting about how it was spent. I mean, they just gave them the money, and they filtered it through an organization that wasn't a government organization. Yeah. So all that needs to be exposed and fixed. That needs to be fixed. Whatever Ray Holberg's personal proclivities were, maybe he just liked Prague. It's a beautiful city. That's another matter altogether, and that's being investigated not only on the state level but on the federal level now. So this is. You're right. It's a different matter, and again, there's a tragic element in it that doesn't excuse what is alleged to have happened, what he's alleged to have done. It doesn't excuse that, but it puts it in a context of here was a very good legislator who did really good work for the people of North Dakota, who apparently, allegedly, we don't know, made some serious personal errors.
We're out of time, and we never even got to the fact that you insulted my city yesterday, the city of Moorhead.
I did?
Yes, you did. And so that might be our next discussion in a few weeks when we do this again, if you're up for it, if you enjoyed our discussion.
I enjoy our discussion, and, given the history of Moorhead, so easy to insult.
Oh, see, okay. That's a good tease for our next discussion. You don't think Moorhead's a blue-collar town?
Oh, no. It's a college town that doesn't even realize it.
Oh, God. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. When's the last time you were in Moorhead?
Yesterday.
Oh, God, that fell through.
You know why? Let me tell you why.
Okay.
I think that the new Hornbacher store in South Moorhead,
The Azul one, yes.
Yes. Is and when no one's paying us from Hornbachers, by the way, guys, is one of the most beautiful, customer-friendly, well-stocked stores in the Hornbacher.
So your exposure to Moorhead is the South Moorhead Azul Hornbachers, that's why you should come up on the north side sometime.
My daughter's a cobber. My daughter's a cobber.
Yep, okay, you should. Yep. So the Azul, where all the fancy people live, that's your exposure. That's your exposure to Moorhead.
See, that's what I'm saying. That Moorhead's got a lot of fancy people. Not a blue collar town.
We'll leave that for next time. Jack, thank you. Jack Zaleski, former editorial page editor of the Forum. Still working, still cranking away.
Good to be with you, Mike. Good to be with you.
You bet. This has been the McFeely Mess podcast at InForum.com. Buy a subscription, by the way, so we can keep exposing the corruption and the nastiness going on in politics, not only in North Dakota, but in Minnesota as well. Thanks for listening.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess podcast at InForum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to InForum.com and search Mike McFeely